Hello and welcome to the Forge and Anvil podcast, where we embrace uncomfortable conversations about culture and politics to sharpen ourselves for the race set before us. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast, and joining me today are my friends Zach and Michael. Both of these gentlemen have unique life experiences as well as political philosophies and overall perspectives. So they are joining me to give those perspectives so that you can enjoy them as well. So Zach, introduce yourself so you don't know.
Hi, I'm Zach Aval, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire, and combat hippie. Peace, love, and heavy weapons.
Alrighty, and Michael, feel free to give yourself an introduction as well.
I'm still less prepared than Zach. My name is Michael. I'm a seminarian student right now pursuing a Master's of Arts in Biblical Studies. I also have a Bachelor's in Christian Studies, a Master's of Science in Leadership, and I want to do the best that I can to promote biblical values in higher education and promote biblical manhood as well.
Excellent. Well, today we are going to be talking through some of the big headlines of the news cycle. And we're going to go ahead and dive right in and give our thoughts and analysis. So the very first news story that we have going on today, controversial internet personality Andrew Tate banned from TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. The internet personality and former kickboxer Andrew Tate, this is ABC News reporting, has spoken out about being banned from Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok this week, accused of misogyny. Tate, who first came into the public eye when he was ejected from the UK reality show Big Brother in 2016, has gone viral across these platforms over the last few months, amassing hundreds of thousands of followers in the process. The ban comes after the 35-year-old's comments were branded to be wildly misogynistic by activist groups. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
What do you say?
Oh, he said all sorts of crazy things, man. Like, there's this one video I remember, like, the first time I ever encountered him, it was like 2 years ago, where it's just like him in a room and he's like, women should clean unprompted. And it's like his reasoning, like, in like a weird way, while it's like not okay. Like, at least it in the like his own, like, it made sense for like his worldview, where like he's like, listen, I buy all the food, I take you out to nice places, like the least you can do is clean my apartment. It's like, that's not how that works. Like, he said like other things. Yeah, like he has like.
Are you familiar with who Andrew Tate is, Michael?
No. I don't,
because
think so.
I was not familiar with him until his banning, which is funny because ironically, when someone gets banned, they tend to get more notice their way. But Zach, do you actually know anything about him in terms of like his background or his presence?
Yeah, I mean, the kickboxing thing I found out recently, but like, yeah, he's got some sort of weird like pyramid scheme too that he's running, and like he has like, unfortunately, he's got a lot of young guys like that are just like, for some reason they're like, yeah, this is a dude I want to like, spend time consuming his content, because like, yeah, like they're schlepping it's like some sort, I forget the exact like grift he's pulling there, but it's a pyramid scheme. And I mainly just know him because like since TikTok has come around, he's kind of like exploded, where people, I think, like both are like sharing it too because like they like him, but also there's like how I have encountered him is through people that just thought he was funny, that like didn't take him serious at all, but like thought like just like because they didn't know he was actually being serious. Basically, they thought it was like he was a character, and I thought that too up until like last month or something like that. Like, I thought this was just like a comedian like doing his thing, where I was like, oh, he's just like purposely being sexist. But no, like he thinks like it's okay to have, just because he like goes out with a girl to like it's not, it's like it's dark. Like, it's just not.
What's interesting is I have a little bit of a different take than yours, Zach, because the little bit that I have heard is I've heard mixed things. Like, I've definitely heard a lot of criticisms of some of the stuff that you're saying of him being like misogynistic and some of his comments, and And I definitely think that there's a lot that I would probably take issue with, based on the little bit of exposure to him I have had. What I've been hearing some people say as well, though, is that they said that in a way he has done some good, though, for just like the manhood community, because a lot of the people that I've been listening to that have kind of done some commentary on him seem to think that he's been at least a net positive overall for things like just being a hard worker as a man, not being afraid to be a man, and not being called toxic just for being a man. Now it's interesting because I've heard some of his comments, and he tends to really find his manhood in being able to get girls, and that is not what I would consider to be proper manhood, obviously. But overall, he's kind of like the opposite side of the spectrum from the feminist movement, which is why, again, you could call him misogynistic, because he's kind of the far end. So in a way, he's almost like swinging the pendulum back. I would say from the little bit of exposure I have had, it doesn't seem like it's very positive, but some of it is like running your business well and things like that. Just encouraging guys to basically be like risk takers and things like that. But again, I have very, very little exposure to him. I didn't know who he was until he got banned. But apparently he's been a big figure apparently over the last like couple of years. And I basically didn't even know about him until he started getting in hot water. So it's really interesting.
No. Yeah, he's definitely not somebody like, I'm not apparently probably far from it, but he's definitely not somebody I would want like my like young boy like associated. It just not only because of the comments and stuff like that. Like I hear what you're saying about like him being a business leader, but again, like running a multi-level marketing thing, it's not a like I would rather use people like my former employer at Pizzeria or my dad, those guys as examples for how to run a business. Also, it's just a bit more tangible than a guy that's like, that tells you like he is so smart that he does not have time to read. That reading is for stupid people. Like that's another thing he said. He's like, I'm so smart that I don't have time to read. I'm busy running a bit. You know what I mean? So like, I guess I can kind of appreciate like the hustle aspect to it. But it's like, it's troubling across the board. It's not something I would consider like, even just by worldly standards, like a man, like, so I guess I can hear what you're saying, that it's definitely seems to be like born out of like a reaction to rather maybe some of the more extreme feminist movement out there. Because like I thought you were going to say, to be honest with you, he provides a good example of what like not to be in a man, and I'm like, that actually kind of makes sense. And to be honest with you, I have not heard anybody make that claim. Just been people like I guess it's nice that they're at least putting him in context, so they're not like taking him out of at least the people I've seen haven't like been taking him out of context, like. But yeah, it's spooky. And I think he has like, this gets into like the real dark territory, but I'm pretty sure he's got like an R. Kelly type of situation. Like the reason why he's no longer in the UK is he's in Romania, where like the sex laws are a little different. So like you can actually basically get away with human trafficking, and like he may or may not be trafficking like underage girls. Like it's creepy. Like, so yeah.
And I don't know enough about that. I know that there's a lot of questions about where he got some of his money. But at the same time, of course, he claims that he has no, wrongdoing. But of course, that's what he's going to claim. But it's interesting. It's one of those things where, I try to tell people, consuming content, whether that be a book or that be a podcast, is like eating a steak. You have to swallow the meat and spit out the fat. And from my understanding, I watched like a couple minutes into his like hour-long farewell video that he posted to a bunch of the alternative platforms, and he was fairly well articulate in that. But again, that was such a brief exposure. But people have kind of compared him to like Jordan Peterson in regards to like him being like a place where men found like freedom to be a man. But I think that again, I've had very little exposure. There's going to be people commenting like, "You stupid idiot," but but again, with a little bit of exposure that I have had, I have heard that he is he has some wacky beliefs, at least when it comes to things like relationships. He believes that you should basically, as a man, sleep with however many women you want.
Yeah.
But there, I think where some of the good things that he's been encouraging people is to be a bold risk taker and to be driven and to be a hard worker, to be the guy that's, showing up first and leaving last, that type of thing. So I think that's where his popularity has come from, is there's been definitely some good things to it. But you pair that with the negatives and you wonder. But that's why it's kind of a lot of the commentary I've seen on him have been people saying, was he a net positive or a net negative? And most people that I was hearing from were saying net positive overall, because he shifted the window, the Overton window, on discussing things like, I think we have we are much closer to being ruled by the feminist worldview in terms of a culture than any form of a masculine worldview. That's not to say that we are ruled by it, but I definitely think that there's a lot more of that in our culture, and there's a lot of men seeking for healthy manhood. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I guess there's some of that I do disagree with. I mean, yeah, that is the thing. Is he a net positive or a net negative has been the conversation, like I've seen as well. But yeah, if you're I can definitely hear what you're saying, where I think some of the more militant, I guess, shall we say, feminist groups, there is you do want to take pride in masculinity, and who you are as a person. But I think he would be a good example of what I would actually consider toxic masculinity, where women are things to be lusted after and are essentially property, which is just not good. That's not what we want, right? And and people like him actually give those feminists that were that a lot of men are kind of worried about, a lot of ammunition. Where if you're just a Joe, if you're a guy like me, I just kind of keep to myself. I walk the straight and narrow. It makes it that much harder now for me to basically get a girlfriend, because if you think about it, look at it from a girl's perspective, right? If you're on Bumble or some online dating, right? There's a lot of risk involved for a young lady. You don't know if I'm an all right dude, if I'm gonna assault you on our date, or if I'm a complete idiot, or somewhere, or all three, or just an all right dude, so I can definitely see there's that side of it as well, where ladies are I believe rightly so, being taught to avoid dudes like this. But I think there's almost an overcorrection in where I think I guess it'd be more of an emotional response, where you kind of just you're more willing to assume that any given fella you meet is going to be like Andrew Tate, or is going to be like the Giga Chad,
Yeah.
And from some of the ladies I talked to at church, that's been, unfortunately, for them and for these young men, that, has been the experience.
Yeah.
So,
Michael, what are your thoughts on toxic masculinity?
I have a few of them. In regards to this Tate dude, I don't know his deal. I just looked up a photo of him to see if I recognize him, and I honestly don't. I'm not in the TikTok world, so I guess I'm relieved of that insanity. But a few things come to mind, because this is a conversation concerning freedom of speech in regards to social media, as well as just masculinity, toxic masculinity, and how we can interact with those notions as men who promote manhood. The promotion of manhood is something that's highly regarded as toxic because of what it sounds like guys like this. I don't know his work, so I can't speak to that, but it sounds like he has multiple occurrences of offensive behavior that have built up towards his banning, as opposed to Dr. Jordan Peterson, who was banned off Twitter for calling a biological female a female. In addition to other things, he used fairly inflammatory speech while writing his message about that woman. I forget her name anyway. His name, whatever we want to say. I don't think that they're comparable. And I would even say the interesting thing to me about Dr. Peterson, many people think that he's speaking specifically to men, but I don't think I've ever heard him articulate that, except that his viewers are primarily men because he's most popular through YouTube, and statistically, men are consuming YouTube at a higher rate. But he doesn't necessarily speak exclusively to men.
Mhm.
I think they're comparable in the result of having been banned, but in the path with which they've taken to get there, Dr. Peterson, he displays a lot of reverence towards the sanctity of women, of monogamy, of manhood being at best challenged so that men can rise to the occasion for self betterment. This guy sounds more like kind of like you're talking about the hustle, and the hustle is a worldly notion that has more to do with personal achievement than moral higher hiring, moral or even ethical success. So it sounds
Yeah.
like this guy is not someone who has any right to speak in the realm of morality. But there's lots of other examples of men who are promoting righteous masculinity that should much be preferred by young men in our culture, like the John Eldridge, Ryan Mickler, Dr. Jordan Peterson are just a few who have platforms with which they can influence young men to have a great stance of masculinity while denouncing toxicity.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the term toxic masculinity has been thrown out way too aggressively in so many instances where it's not actually present. And if you are someone, by the way, that's listening that loves Andrew Tate, like, we're not judging you. I mean, we obviously, none of us, Zach probably has the most exposure to him, but none of us really have that much exposure to this guy, clearly. So if we're wrong about this, like, we apologize. We're just giving you our quick thoughts on the little exposure that we have had, and for Michael, that's none. So there's no shame if he's, a way better dude than any of us know. It's slightly just off of rumors, and for me, it's off of a tiny exposure of his actual content. So I just want to throw that out there, that I acknowledge that we could make mistakes in that regard. So there's no shame to any of you. But moving on to our next story, Biden to cancel, this is the post millennial reporting this, Biden to cancel up to $10,000 in student loan debt, extend payment pause until December. The Biden administration is reportedly poised to cancel up to $10,000 in student loan debt for borrowers, extend payment pause on federal loans at the end of the year. According to the Washington Post, 4 people familiar with the matter said that borrowers making less than $125,000 per year, or $250,000 for married couples that filed taxes jointly, would be eligible for the cancellation. In addition, Pell Grant recipients will see up to $20,000 of their debt be canceled. The pandemic era pause of the federal student loan payments, which began during the Trump administration, will continue to be paused through December 31st. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably gonna have a different opinion on this than you two fellas. I guess I'll start with something you guys probably will agree with. It's not the best idea to throw another like $10,000 in gasoline on the inflationary fire that we are experiencing right now. At the same time, like forgiving student debt is like something I've like slowly evolved on over the years, where like I still don't think, like, it's abundantly clear to me that those loans should have never been an option to begin with, simply because they are predatory. I mean, you're dealing with children basically who are coming out of high school, and kind of like Connor and I talked about last week, where they're still kind of like being sold that future that doesn't really exist anymore, where you go to college and you get that degree, and again, like I kind of said last time, that isn't for everybody. I would argue, like, at this point in time in history, it's less for everybody than it has been in the past. And so to sucker kids into debt that's extraordinarily difficult to repay, like, you can't, if I remember correctly, like, you can die and still have to pay your student loan back. So I mean, like, even though it sucks, like, in any time period, like, if they forgave the student loan, like, we're still going to have to deal with the severe, economic consequences of that, namely being, inflation, and increased prices and things like that. But at the same time, it seems to be the correct thing to do because none of these people can pay these loans back. A lot of them regret the decision to take the loan to begin with because they didn't know any better. And not to mention the government is one of the things they harp on a lot is, and I guess is coming from, I work in finance. So like it's coming from that background where there's a lot of regulation against predatory lending. And I don't really, I guess, face value have an issue with that, but at least like there seems to be like an unequal standard there where they're allowed to predatorily lend, but like the rest of us, can't. Like, it seems like if we're all things being equal, like nobody should be allowed to take advantage of anybody. But in the case of the student loans, that's very clearly not the case. And so a lot of these people ended up, and some of them ended up getting useful degrees and then just not making, it's just an income issue where they don't make enough to pay back that loan sufficiently on top of whatever debt they may not have. And a lot of them are hippies like me and just got art degrees. And so that's a different problem in and of itself. But, forgiving the student loans and then just hopefully I would like to see them not do it ever again. Just cancel that program altogether. Save future generations that hassle. And then also future presidents of having to, to deal with that.
If I could respond to the notion of predatory loan obligation. Now, I'll just speak for myself. I've got nearly 5 years of higher academic enrollment and advisement under my belt now in my professional career. And the people that I was servicing in particular were international and Native American tribal students who are among the most susceptible to that predatory nature because they're ignorant. And that doesn't mean that they're unintelligent, but they're ignorant to the opportunities that are afforded them or to the detriment of these resources. That being said, every recipient of financial aid goes through not just the free application for federal student aid, which is the FAFSA, but also if they go to a school that is being audited and held to the standards that any school should, then they will also have to complete an entrance counseling, which is a huge tutorial giving them the specific numbers of the worst case scenario for how they'll have to pay off their loans. And in that entrance counseling, they will project what they are anticipating a 4-year degree looking like, which usually is in excess to $80,000. And then they continue and show you the repayment plan over a 10-year period, which of course the interest rates, I don't know where they are now. They might be about 4.2, but they used to be a 3.6%. They've steadily increased, but those interest rates can dramatically increase the amount to $100,000 to $120,000 just for an undergraduate degree in arts. My point, though, is that in that entrance counseling that's demanded by the auditing services for federal student aid, they are having to go through the pages and calculate that risk. Additionally, they're required to complete a master promissory note, which is signing saying, I have agreed to the terms of this financial aid, and here's a reference of a personal reference of somebody who can attest for me on my behalf that I have also looked at these things. So in regards to the predatory nature, it is only predatory insofar as the individual who is assigned the loan is neglecting their responsibility to read the pages that they are being forced to scroll through and click continue over and over and over again. That being said, there's a lot of 18-year-olds who are ignorant and make very poor decisions. However, all in all, the student loan crisis is, I think, one born of naivety and ignorance, and not of cruelty on behalf of the lender as much as it is the uneducation of the individuals signing up for these things. as far as forgiveness, I think it would be more just to forgive medical debts than student loan debts, because that's something that oftentimes people do not elect to have medical issues. But all in all, I'll tie up my little rant here by saying the Biden administration, I am suspect as to whether or not the actual implementation of this policy will come to fruition. And if it does, I believe it will likely be for a small select demographic that we're not going to see as widespread of a relief as many people would like. I think it's a political ploy as we approach the midterms to dangle the carrot out in front of the voters and ultimately get the few votes that they need to retain the amount of power necessary for that political party, for that political campaign, even that political agenda. And unfortunately, it buys into this us versus them mentality of our government and in our policy making for the United States that is once again yet another opportunity to create divisiveness in the polls.
Mm-hmm. And I do think too, I think playing devil's advocate, I would agree with what you're saying of the requirements for students, that they're not, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're predatory in regards to the students do have to do a lot of paperwork in order to get into class. So there's no real excuse in terms of not reading the papers, but at the same time, we live in such a fast-paced society that I think it is commonplace to sign on the dotted line before reading. Not to say that is a good idea, obviously, but just playing devil's advocate here, you have to do that for so many things. I mean, you want to download a new app, and they'll have you accept their terms and conditions, and it's pages and pages of legalese that no one has the time to read, so everyone just skips to the bottom, checks that they accept, and then they move on, and then who knows what all they agreed to. And that is a frustration. I wish in a way that we could have maybe some better laws surrounding things like that, making the terms of service on things like that a little bit easier to understand, a little more black and white. But at the same time, I'm definitely of the mindset of this forgiveness is not a good idea, because I mean, I did go to community college, so I intentionally went a cheaper route. I did not go to university for full 4 years. I did my my generals at a community college and paid for it out of pocket while working full time and doing school full time. And then I did continue to work even once I did go to university, and I even had a little bit of help from parents, and I'm super blessed to have done that. But to be honest, I was at a point in my life where I was shocked that I got that additional help as well, because I was just so used to paying for things on my own. And all that to say, I went to a cheaper university as well, and there are individuals that are going straight to university without caring about the cost, because they're mostly going because they do want to just go to college, because they're either being told they have to, or they are told it's going to be fun and they'll find themselves, or there are those individuals that do go for a good career path. But either way, at the end of the day, like no one paid I did have a little bit of student loans from university at the very end that I paid off immediately. And, I don't expect anyone to have paid for that. That's something that was my responsibility. I signed up for them. I had to pay them. And I will say, to Zach's point of them being predatory, I feel like I did not have a very clear understanding of what I was doing. Even the entrance counseling that you referenced, Michael, for going through and like knowing everything that you're getting into before you do it. I wasn't told what I was doing when I was told to do that. So I don't think I fully knew that I was like reading through something that was just supposed to educate me. It was kind of like a little bit confusing, and maybe that's just on my end, but I definitely know I was in a rush to get enrolled, and I was going so quick.
Very common.
I'm sure the quality as well, like to Michael's point of those complying with that auditing. I'm sure like the quality of that is going to vary depending
Yes.
on the university. So like an Ivy
The
League
individual
school,
in the university, not
and
just
yeah, that
yeah.
that too. Like you might actually have. I would like to meet these people because I'll be kind of afraid of them. But there's probably somebody that reads those like 800,000 pages of the, you know what I mean? And so like they
Out
know
loud,
exactly, yeah, what they're signing up for. So yeah, I mean, but again, like it just I keep circling back around because I've done kind of that thought about what Connor was talking about there too. But it seems like I just at this where I keep coming back to is like that's all well and good, and like you do have like that responsibility. I think we're all in agreement on that. Like, because I a similar background to Connor, where I paid completely out of pocket. So like, where's my check? You know, I did.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like, I mean, but at the same time, like, I also don't think it's fair for somebody to be punished for something that they weren't, they didn't exactly know, even if they did go through that, that counseling, and they did have to go through those entry level things there. I don't know that it's necessarily, it's like, I'm like of two minds of it, I guess, where it's like, I don't think it's fair for them to be punished their entire lives. And I also, just because I'm more economically minded, I understand that like you can't just erase, like you can like at least eliminate the burden for those people, but it doesn't eliminate the cost economically, it just shifts it. And so like what I was saying, I guess at the beginning is like, if any other time I would have been like, like crap, like it's just going to be uncomfortable, at the grocery store for the next couple of months. But we're already experiencing record high inflation that like now seems like the worst possible time to, like I read the article, a couple weeks ago about, forgiving student debt. And I was like, all right. But I was like, but then at the same time, I was like, oh, like this isn't the time to do that. And like, I think it's very much for the reasons that Michael outlined it's just to, I mean, it's not a surprise. Like everybody tries to buy votes.
It's a midterm political stunt, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if it's going to be something that goes through, like you were saying, Michael, or they might even start advertising, in a month or two. And, maybe mark this video if I end up being right with this prediction, but they might in a month or two be saying like, like we just need more time to get this through. We got to make sure that we win, because if we lose our majority, there it goes. Because then that's kind of like a win-win for the Democratic Party, because then they can say, they can either win the majority and get it done, or lose the majority and say, oh, it's those darn Republicans that caused it to not happen, and then they just make the Republican Party look bad. And to be honest, either way, they've kind of set themselves up to be in a good place.
The Republican Party doesn't need any help looking bad. Like at this point,
neither party
neither party needs help looking bad.
Can I make a comment about the process? As I have been thinking about this while we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth mentioning that there are many state schools and other schools that will actually have a guidance counselor or advisor serve as a financial aid preparer. And in those circumstances, oftentimes I believe it to be entirely unethical, but there can be individuals that are employed by the university or by the college that will prepare a FAFSA or entrance counseling or even those type things for the student and walk through those steps and deny the student the opportunity to even have to click through the pages themselves. So I do want to go back on what I said in order to say that that circumstance is a reality. It's an unethical reality. I think it's a cruel misuse of academic enrollment and the sales world that is at times. So that does occur often in a lot of schools. And what I would encourage any listener, if you're in a position to be going into school, or if you know someone that you love that is going into school, please advise them and guide them to be conscious of these decisions as well. Because it is still your responsibility, I think, as the person signing on the dotted line, to elect to go to a university. It's no secret that universities are wildly overpriced. That's a common knowledge through and through. So it's not as if anyone got suckered into college without knowing it'd be expensive. But there are times when those safeguards that are put in place to help people understand the depth of the decision they're making is totally hurdled over. So I do want to make that statement as well, because that's a reality.
Yeah. Also,
Absolutely. Oh, go
yeah, I
ahead.
would say, like, just in general, I guess I'm not against like people borrowing money to go to school. It's just the federal student aid to me that seems to be, because like other like more market-based solutions, you can kind of like you have recourse against that, right? Like you can tell, like if I mean, it does unfortunately take a few people getting hosed, but like to kind of serve as that warning to say, hey, like these people will definitely, they'll definitely shaft you,
Yeah.
And then so I mean, like I'm not against it, like in principle. I chose not to go that route and would like actively encourage people to maybe like, like, I mean, honestly, I hate to sound like a schmuck, but like honestly, it takes some work. Like like Connor was saying, like he worked, full time and went to school full time. Like, and then what he also forgot to mention is a lot of the times during that he was also still doing music, which in and of itself, like his band was performing as a job in and of it, and I was too. It was something like for a while there, like every other weekend I was performing.
Yeah, oftentimes
So
together.
yeah, lots of times to get. Yeah, Connor was that, and even if he wasn't performing or I wasn't performing, we were at that show.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
like, yeah, like it just like I lost hair because of it. Like I look like a complete schlub now, but like it's allowed me to live a very comfortable lifestyle, because of it, and I saved a lot of dough. So
The one argument that I have
Talking
heard about student debt cancellation that I would be willing to entertain is under a few conditions. First of all, right now, the way that the Biden administration is doing it, they are giving the bill to people that do not have student debt. And that's a bunch of crap because there are people that didn't even go to college that their tax dollars are now going to pay off Johnny's, degree in mental health that he's not even using now that he's graduated, that he's still in debt from. And so one of the conditions would be that instead of the taxpayers getting burned, to instead seize some of the endowments of some of these universities that have really overbloated their own assets that they have, because really the only reason why they got those assets was because they had a guaranteed paycheck coming from the federal government every single year for the majority, if not all, of their students. Then the second condition that I would say as well is that they have to suspend the program once they do the debt forgiveness. I'd be okay if a whole like one time we get rid of all of it, if it was done by seizing the endowments, and if there's any left over, we can talk about shouldering that burden together as a country if we can get rid of the program altogether. But anything aside from that, I think it's just a dishonest conversation because we're still keeping these programs open. $10,000 is going to be a round of students that are going to all be in debt and continue to use those loans. So I think it is a dishonest conversation where it sits right now, and I think it's a political stunt. But let's move on because we do have other things to get to. So this is a story. It's being reported this is from the Daily Wire, actually. FBI response to Zuckerberg's bombshell Rogan revelation. Bureau helped bury Hunter Biden laptop story. Did you guys hear about that at all today?
I tried watching that podcast, but like Mark Zuckerberg, it's so like uncaptivating that like I just like I mean peace and love of everything with peace and love, of course, my brother in Christ, but like he's got the charisma of like a turkey sandwich on rye. Like there, like I don't think he's a robot, but like if I'm tired, like he's doing a pretty good job of convincing people that he is. Like, so I only saw clips of it.
Yeah, you can't just listen to that. You need to be doing something active with that in the background so that.
Oh man, I was cooking and I was like, like I was thinking about like other things. I was like, what am I
Yeah.
gonna do at work tomorrow?
Don't
Like,
face plant into the grill.
oh yeah, it was,
Oh man.
yeah.
So here, well, let's go and read this for a bit. So it says the FBI finally weighed in on Mark Zuckerberg's claim that Facebook suppressed the Hunter Biden story after being warned about Russian propaganda by the Bureau ahead of the 2020 presidential election. So if you didn't see it, basically he's being interviewed by Rogan. He just straight up says that the reason why the Hunter Biden laptop story vanished as much as it did was because the FBI came to them and said, "Hey, there's going to be some, we think that there's going to be some Russian misinformation coming up soon. So be on the lookout for it. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge." And that's why they censored the laptop story. So this is the FBI's response. So it says the FBI routinely notifies U.S. private sector entities, including social media providers, of potential threat information so they can decide how to better defend against threats. The Bureau said in a statement Friday night, adding that it cannot ask or direct companies to take action on information received.
So as a threat,
So
also misinformation.
that's what I watched I watched that clip on YouTube of Mark Zuckerberg talking about that whole thing. So I am inclined to actually, in this particular case, I didn't get the sense that Mark Zuckerberg was lying about that, and like if I'm removing my own opinion about the FBI and all the things that they do, like I can kind of get behind the idea of them going to these large social media platforms and saying like, "Hey, just be on the lookout for this." Like that was very much. I don't like Mark Zuckerberg basically, if I remember correctly, that was basically what he said. Like he's like, "Yes, we were contacted, but I don't think he was like told to actively suppress that." That's a different matter. I think he was saying, "Hey, like, be aware. Like, we're expecting, bots or agent or other states,
Russia
basically."
propaganda is what they
Yeah,
would say.
like, in so many words, right? Like other maybe enemies of the United States, let's say, like using that to their own political advantage on the world stage. That was all. So I think, like, I think Mark Zuckerberg was wrong, and he seems to, like, in that clip I saw, seems to kind of like understand that, like, because that ended up being something that was actually factual. Because at the time he's like hiding that in the newsfeed and stuff like that, he doesn't know if it's a lie or if it's the truth, and so it's a judgment call. And he like in his weird robot way, seemed genuine in the sense that like, yeah, like it was a judgment call, like I was wrong, and like because of his mistake, like it did, I don't know if it like drastically affected the election, but it certainly had a noticeable effect on the democratic process.
I don't
So
remember what the exact number was, but there was a survey done a little bit after the election where they did survey a lot of, especially the early voters, because remember there was a lot of people that early voted, and they did say, I think it was either was as many as 1 out of 3, but only as little as 1 out of 5 people that voted for Biden said they would have changed their mind if they knew about it before the election and before they cast their vote. And that would be enough to completely change the results of the election, which actually goes to the last that I wanted to cover because it is directly tied to this, which is Trump has already come out and he is demanding to be declared the rightful winner of the 2020 election. Let me see if I can find his exact quote here on that. He said, so it now comes out conclusively that the FBI buried the Hunter Biden laptop story before the election, knowing that if they didn't, Trump would have easily won the 2020 presidential election. This is massive fraud and election interference at a level never seen before in our country. Remedy, declare the rightful winner, or, and this would be the minimal solution, declare the 2020 election irreparable, compromised, and have a new election immediately.
I think that's ignorant.
Yeah. I mean, because like I hear what you're saying. Like, like that doesn't surprise me, and I like I have no reason to believe that like those people like lied on that poll. But like it's one thing to like say something when you're polled about it, especially after the fact. It's another thing to actually follow through with that. And I mean, like, you have to also forget that there's still some one of the reasons why I think the Democrats were so successful the last election cycle is because they basically kept Joe Biden out of the public, because every time he did, like, his brain didn't work, like it was very clear he's been dead for at least 15 years. Like, so, I mean, there's still that side of things. And then there's still just like Trump as a phenomenon and like what he means culturally. I think we were all at being the most charitable, just tired. I think a lot of us, myself included, were kind of just exhausted. Like, just like, like if I have to see one more like headline about Trump, like I'll commit an atrocity kind of, like we're all just kind of tired. And then, the January 6th thing happened. So again, like, even like, I mean, there's a lot of sketchy stuff with that too. But I mean, like, I still don't see it really coming, I guess, to make it succinct. I don't see it really working out in Trump's favor.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen, obviously, as much as I think that I definitely think that Trump has to. I mean, in a way, he's entitled to say it,
Oh, absolutely.
Like, because here's the one thing that I will say: if the FBI came to you and you owned a business and they said, "Hey, you should really seriously think about doing this," I mean, there's
see, again, I'm not so sure.
See, you could say that it's on Zuckerberg at that point, but at the same time, like when the FBI comes and tells you like you should be on the lookout for this big drop that's going to be coming that we think is going to be propaganda, hint hint, nudge nudge, like it is a little like suspect to think that they wouldn't like bend over backwards to accommodate the FBI. I mean, do you want to say no to a secret to one of these intelligence agencies? So
I do. I can't wait to get disappeared. I got, what I mean? Like, it'll just prove me right. All the people that think I'm
be
nuts.
careful, you're gonna get suicided.
Yeah.
Epstein.
Dude, I hope it's at least
we all are in complete agreement with that.
Yeah. The thing about Trump's statement is that he's responding to the injustice that was done against him. Rightfully so, and against his campaign. But if he were to have his way, it would be equally as unjust toward the Biden administration or the voters, because what we're doing is we're acting upon the premise of what could have been, not what has been. What could have been was a mass influx of information that educated the voters. But that could go in any direction always. And that's the entire political campaigning, is a smear campaign towards the other and try to put yourself on a pedestal. That's the system of our bipartisan structure, unfortunately. And really, for Trump to say that, makes sense. It would suck pretty bad to be in his position and watch Sleepy Joe string together sentences and read the teleprompter cues. It would be really frustrating, but also how much more frustrating would it be if someone decided, oh, yeah, let's go back on that and just make you president again. Well,
I don't know how many people would be that disappointed
happen
right now, though. only because of the job that the Biden administration is doing. When you think about things like Afghanistan, inflation,
definitely,
gas prices,
for sure.
The solution is not, in my opinion, and this is purely opinion, not any gospel by any means, but I would love it if Trump was never president again. I'd love it if Biden, Lord knows he couldn't be president again. If we could just get a clean slate and bring in someone who can be more uniting. I mean, we like to throw this idea around of the divisiveness of Trump, and he's so horrible. Well, Biden's pretty darn divisive. And as a matter of fact, Obama was extremely divisive. And, how far do we want to go back since there was a unity? I think George W. maybe tried 9/11.
Divisive. But he
well, exactly.
Definitely wasn't. I mean, he was just a suit. That was his issue. He was a suit that
Yeah.
I don't even know if it was
horrible
that. Like,
topic.
it's very clear, like, the people he surrounded himself with, right? Because, like, if you go back in history, there's always somebody whispering in Nero's ear, right, in the emperor's ear.
Mhm.
And I think, and for Bush, it was just the people he surrounded himself with. And also, like, peace and love, of course, everything with peace and love might not have been the brightest. There's a lot of evidence to suggest not the brightest bulb in the box, if you know what I mean. And I think you do. So, you couple that with, people that have their own, I guess I hate to be like the conspiracy Alex Jones guy, but they definitely had their own reasons for, being in the positions they were in, and talked him into doing the things that he did.
The one thing I will disagree with a little bit with what you said, Michael, though, is that I'm not saying that Trump would be my first pick if I could pick any person in the world to be president, because obviously he wouldn't be. I describe myself as not an always Trumper, but I'm not a never Trumper. I'm basically I'm just going to go with what I think is good for the country. I will say I think he was a way better president than I expected him to be. When 2016 first happened, I was really like, what's about to go down? And I think some of the things that, to me personally, that were major victories that only happened under Trump, and I think only probably would have happened under Trump. He got 3 Supreme Court justices that are originalists in terms of how they read the Constitution, and I think that is really important, and that is why Roe v. Wade was overturned, for example. That is why we've had some Second Amendment wins as well. And then what he did in the Middle East was actually huge. And then you're also forgetting, like, or maybe you're not forgetting, but it's easy to forget because of the media was so Trump all the time. But he even went to the militarized zone, the demilitarized zone, in between North and South Korea, and he walked through and he visited North Korea and shook hands with Kimmy, with Big Kim. I'm making myself laugh now. But he went through and did that, and he was completely unarmed. I mean, that was actually whether you love Trump or hate him, you cannot deny that was a gutsy move. And everyone was saying that he was going to start World War III, but actually he was the first president in our lifetimes, since we've all been alive, that did not start any new wars. And he actually was beginning to get us out of the Middle East before Biden, of course, really screwed up the evacuation. But I actually think that there was a lot of good things that he did that I was surprised by. And although I agree that he could be divisive in some of his rhetoric, to some degree, you also have to remember he was attacked basically from before he was even in office. Honestly, he was attacked the moment he announced his candidacy. And there was the Russia collusion hoax that did turn out to be a hoax. And there was so many things. He was sued multiple times. He was impeached twice. So to some degree, they were attacking everything. I remember when they were coming after like Barron Trump, who, is a minor. They're going after him. They were talking about his looks and things like that. Like, it was crazy, nasty stuff. So to some degree, it was like, yeah, they're slinging the most mud that they had ever slung at a president in modern history. Well. So to some degree, I think that his punching back was pretty justified. But again, I'm not. It's one of those things where I don't like to just defend Trump just because, but it's more like I do think it would be hard to have a lot of decorum in his handling of himself when he's being attacked so heavily. Because I actually think that 2016 there were 2 outsiders that rushed the ivory tower. I think Trump and Bernie. I think the difference is I think Bernie bent over backwards and completely, because I disagreed with a lot of Bernie, but I think that he believed what he believed. But I think that he bent over backwards, and Hillary got the nomination, and I think that now he's just a total shill. I think that he has probably still holds a lot of his beliefs, but I don't think that he speaks out against the machine anymore. Whereas Trump beat Bush. He beat Jeb Bush in the primary. I actually think he made it through to the ivory tower, and that's why they hate him. That's why they hate him so much.
Mhm.
I mean, there's definitely things that he did that I disagree with. The biggest thing is his entire handling of COVID. I think that he did a lot of things wrong that really caused us to have a lot of mess with lockdowns and stuff like that. I'm not blaming him for all the lockdowns. It wasn't necessarily him, but he also could have done more to really discourage it, I think. And yeah, I think that he did a lot of things wrong in that last bit with COVID, but the economy was great and he had a lot of great successes on the world stage. So that's my rant about it, at least. So not to say that I'm definitively going to vote for him if he's the runner up or the candidate.
But if you have to,
but if I have to, if that's my
similar
option,
place where I am, where if that's the option, then so be it. But I'd rather not be the option. I think the attacks on Trump, yes, he was attacked more than I think we've seen any political candidate be attacked globally and nationally, certainly. But the uniqueness of that strategy is that Trump is a proud, strong, ferocious, and he's a bold individual. And when he's cornered, he's a ravenous wolf. You know, he's rabid. He's foaming at the mouth and will lash out in any direction. So I think it was strategic to continue to beat against him so that he could beat himself out of the public view. Yeah. And in some ways, he did that. However, his policy does speak for itself, and that's why he has so many loyalists who are desperate for the policy, no matter what the social consequence. Yeah. So I think it's unfortunate that that's the ploy that was put into place, but it's not at all surprising, having seen his character even prior to election. He's a very defensive and aggressive individual, which serves for strong defensive leadership. And I think that's why he had such a strong presence with Putin and with Kim Jong-un and you name it, these world powers. He presented himself as, my button's bigger, bring it. But on the home front, that also allowed for people to smear him into oblivion, and he's still raging and fighting tooth and nail for every inch of influence. So that's why I think his divisiveness is not of his own doing. That doesn't make him any less divisive. Yeah. I would hope to have a level-headed individual who can speak as well as Obama, but have policies as noble as most of Trump's policies.
So you're looking for Ron DeSantis. And we'll see about him. I mean, you know, he still has enough time where he can show himself to be great. I mean, he already has, but is he going to continue? Yeah. Is he going to continue the legacy of bringing about more freedoms, or is he just going to continue the legacy of growing the federal government? The one thing that Trump has right now that would make me vote for him again is he's planning on firing a ton of people in the bureaucratic state. That's the main thing that I'm like, yeah, shrink the Fed, go for it. Like get some Ron Paul up here. Like, but I would actually prefer to see him instead of DeSantis as his VP, even though I think DeSantis is going to be a great potential future president one day. I would love to see Trump be balanced by someone for VP like a Rand Paul. Because if Rand could bring some of those libertarian ideas and actually bring them into like practice in Washington with how Washington is ran, that could really be effective. And I think that he's a lot different than Trump, and that would be a good thing. I think that they would balance each other, but that's just one idea I have.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess that leaves me like the sole, like never Trumper, I guess. I mean, I guess I kind of didn't see that coming. I'm ashamed to admit, but no, there's no. At this point, there's certainly not a future where I would vote for Trump, and I don't see myself, to be perfectly honest with you, not to like. I know we kind of have a tendency to like start conversations and then have to put them off, or later date. But I don't see myself really ever voting again, to be honest with you. And I don't really, I'm not going to bother you guys with that now. But yeah, I don't. I disagree with Michael in the sense that I think a lot of Trump's divisiveness was intentional, at least in the sense that he knew exactly what he was saying, and he knew who he was poking when he was saying it. And then I disagree with Connor in the sense that, like, I definitely do not, I've never bought that argument that he was an outsider. I just don't. And same with Bernie Sanders, because once, I mean, in the case of Bernie Sanders, once you've been in politics as long as he has, like, as a career, right, it's impossible. Oh, it's at least, I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's not likely, I guess I should say, that you're not somehow corrupted by that. It's just you spend, you know, it's kind of like you're a product of your environment. If you spend, you know, you and I both know folks that, and Michael probably knows people too, that they were just like hung out with the wrong people for far too long. And it's very hard to come back from that. It takes a lot of work. So in that sense, I've never thought that Bernie Sanders also was really who he claimed to be. I do agree with you, though, that I do think even though I disagree with him, I can at least respect the principle, you know, and at least standing by what you believe for so long, even if it is kind of nutty. And Trump has always been, and like if you go back and look just the way he worked with in New York City and stuff like that, he's never been one to shy away from getting his hands dirty in the sense of, like, you know, maybe tossing a few bucks here and there to certain political figures. Because I always thought it was funny that he ran as a Republican, because everybody knows him as a Democrat. So I thought it was so funny that he was able to trick essentially, you know, more than half the country into believing that he was a Republican when he's, you know, rubbed shoulders with the Clintons and stuff like that. He's definitely tossed money to various, you know, maybe not exclusively, you know, left-wing causes or Democrat-run causes, but he's tossed money around. And once you're, you know, again, once you're in that sort of, there's something weird about that New York businessman scene or business person scene where you just, it rubs off on you. And if, you know, you're not careful or you don't have people in your life, like a good, you know, like a good friend or like a strong spiritual advisor, you know, to help kind of like correct you and kind of like help steer you on that straight and narrow. Like it's far too easy to kind of just get swept up, you know, swept away in it. And I guess that would be the most charitable way to, you know, me not knowing him as a person, right? Just knowing him as a president and a cultural figure for pretty much all of our lives, you know, before. I mean, you know, I think it's weird to kind of almost think about it like now as like somebody who seemingly wasn't really interested in politics up until like 2015, 2016. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we don't have time to address everything you said there, but all I would say is that he advanced a lot of conservative causes, even though I agree he was the New York liberal beforehand. So to me, it's like if he's doing the right thing, though, he's doing the right thing. And as far as whether or not he's a true outsider, I think we'll find out once he's no longer able to run for office. If he becomes a George Bush, where he's hanging out with Obama and the Clintons and whatnot afterward, the old boys club, after he's no longer able to be president, then I will totally concede that to you. But I see more likely if he was not to run again, if he announced that tomorrow that he's no longer running ever again, I think they'd still try to go after him. That's what makes me think he's an outsider. I could be wrong, but we'll find out. Only time will tell that. But,
yeah, there's a difference between being an outsider and like just not being liked by everybody, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And maybe like, that's true. Maybe that's a third route. But either way, that was the show. So thank you, Zach, and thank you, Michael. Appreciate your time. And feel free to go ahead and like this video, hit the plus sign, do whatever you got to do on whatever site you're watching this. And thank you so much. This has been the Forge and Anvil podcast, and we hope you have a great night.